People ask me about the old days, and they expect me to say it was hard. They expect me to talk about hardship and want me to confirm what they already believe, which is that everything before electricity was a lesser time, a waiting time, a time that people endured until the real life came along. I've lived 88 years, and I've seen both worlds, and I'm here to tell you that the people who say it simply and flatly as though the old life was only suffering are not wrong, but they are. Not right either. And the difference between wrong and not right is the entire substance of what I am going to tell you. But there is one thing about the darkness that I never expected to miss. One thing I could not have told you I valued until it was gone. And when it was gone, I felt the loss of it in the same way you feel the loss of something you did not think to call a gift because it had always been there. I've been trying to say this for 20 years, and the right words have not come until now. Now I'm old enough that the trying has stopped and the saying is all that is left. I was born in May of 1837, western Pennsylvania, Westmoreland County, on a farm about 6 miles south of a town called Greensburg, which sat on the edge of the Laurel Highlands and smelled of coal smoke and the pine woods that came down from the mountains and of the blacksmith's shop on the main road that you could smell a beesham. Quarter mile before you reached it, that particular hot iron smell that is like no other smell in the world. My father's name was Ezekiel Ford. He farmed corn and rye and kept a small stand of timber that he sold to the tannery in Greensburg at $4 a cord, which was good money in those years if you had the trees and the time to cut them. He also kept bees, 8 hives, and sold the honey at market for 12 cents a pound, which did not make him rich but made him comfortable in the particular way of a man who has diversified his income slightly more than his neighbors and therefore worries slightly less. The house was built in 1821, the year of my father's marriage, and it was a solid house of the kind that solid men build, which means it would still be standing today if someone were in it to keep it, which no one is. Fieldstone foundation, hewn timber frame, 4 rooms below, 2 above, and a root cellar under the kitchen. That was the coldest place on earth in January, and the most welcome place on earth in July. My mother kept the root cellar the way my father kept the bees, with careful attention and a proprietary satisfaction, and she could tell you at any moment in any month exactly what was in it, down to the number of crocks of preserved beans and the precise level of the salt barrel, and whether the turnips were holding or going soft. There were 4 of us children. I was the third. My brother Eli, born 1831. My sister Martha, born 1834. Then me. Then my youngest brother Daniel, born 1840. We were a farming family in the way of all farming families in those years, which means the children worked, which means I worked from the time I could be reliably assigned a task and carry it through to completion, which was approximately 5 years old. 5 years old, I was carrying water from the well to the house. By 8, I was a full participant in the kitchen work. By 12, there was almost nothing my mother did that I could not do alongside her. I want to tell you about the light, because that is what I promised, and that is what most people want to know when they ask. But I want to tell you the truth about it, not the romantic version, and not the pure hardship version, because the truth is more interesting than either of those, and it is the truth that has stayed with me. The light in our house came from tallow candles and from the fireplace, and in summer from the open windows and doors, and from the long evenings that stay light in Pennsylvania until almost 9 o'clock in July. We made our own candles. My name is Ruth Catherine Once-in-a-February, dipping them in the fall and molding them in the spring, and we had perhaps 200 candles for the year, which sounds like a great many and is not as many as you might think when you understand that 200 candles is 100 evenings of 2 candles burning, or 50 evenings of 4 candles burning, and that 2 candles at a table is a dim light, a reading light only if you sit very close, a light that throws shadows rather than eliminating them. We burned a candle only when we needed it. That is the first thing people do not understand about the old life and the old light. Every candle was a resource with a finite limit and a cost, both the cost of the tallow, which was money, and the cost of the making, which was time. And you did not burn a candle carelessly any more than you would pour out a jar of preserved fruit on a whim. You lit a candle when you needed to see something specific, and you carried the candle with you when you moved, and you blew it out when you were done. And in the meantime, the rest of the house was dark. Not dim, dark. I want to be precise about this because the word dim suggests something you can still see in, a quality of light that is reduced but not absent. The dark of a farmhouse in 1845 when the fire has gone low and the candle is in the next room is not dim. It is full dark, the kind in which you cannot see your hand in front of your face, in which you navigate entirely by memory and touch, in which the familiar becomes unfamiliar because its shape is invisible and only its position, which you know because you have moved through this house 10,000 times, tells you where you are. That dark was normal. I grew up in it the way you grow up in weather that seems ordinary because it has always been the weather. I did not think of it as an absence. It was Whitmona simply the condition of nighttime, the way cold is the condition of winter. Not a problem to be solved, but a fact to be managed. The managing of it was part of the work of the household in a way that people today cannot quite grasp because they have never had to manage it. You planned your evenings around the light. You did the work that required seeing during the hours when seeing was possible, and you did the work that did not require seeing in the hours when it was not. My mother knitted in the evenings by the fire, which gave enough light for the hands to work if the hands knew what they were doing, which hers did. She could knit a man's heavy sock without looking at it, purely by the feel of the needles and the count of the stitches. And she did this in the firelight every evening of the winter months, from first frost to last. My father read. He held the book close to the fire and he read slowly, the way people read when the light does not cooperate. And he went to bed earlier than people go to bed today because there was a limit to how long you could hold a book close to a fire before the fire required attention or the book became too heavy. We went to bed with the dark, not immediately. We had our evening hours, the time between supper and sleep that was the closest thing to leisure in the day. But those hours happened in a particular quality of light that shaped what was possible in them, and what was possible was specific and limited, and in that specific and limited quality had something that I have been trying to name for 20 years and have not quite named. I need to tell you about my husband first, because what I have to say about the darkness and the light is inseparable from what I have to say about him, and the inseparability of those two things is the center of what I have been trying to tell. My husband's name was Leonard Hamill. I married him in 1856 when I was 19 and he was 22. He was a farmer's second son from the next county, Washington County, and he came to Westmoreland County because his older brother had the farm, and there was nothing for a second son except to find his own land or hire himself out. And Leonard was not a man who could hire himself out to someone else's direction for more than one season without it becoming a problem. He needed to be making his own decisions. That was his nature from the beginning, and it stayed his nature for the 51 years we were married. He was not an easy man. I will say that plainly because it would be dishonest to tell this particular story without saying it. He was capable and principled and in his own way deeply loving. But he was also stubborn in the specific way of a man who has had to fight for everything he has, and has therefore developed a grip that does not easily release. And that grip extended to opinions and to ways of doing things, and to the conviction that he was right about most things most of the time, which was true more often than not, but was not true as often as he believed. We were a good match in the ways that count, and a difficult match in the ways that require management, and we managed for 51 years, which is itself a kind of answer to the question of whether we were well suited. Now I need to tell you what the evenings were like. The evenings were when I knew Leonard best. I have thought about this for many years, why it should be the evenings rather than the days, and I have come to understand that the answer is the light, or the lack of it, in a way that is not poetic, but is entirely practical. The days were full of work and of the urgency of work, of the things that had to be done in the sequence they had to be done in, or the whole structure of the day failed. Leonard was in the fields or the barn or the woodlot. I was in the house or the garden or the dairy. We crossed paths constantly, but did not often have the time or the inclination to stop and be with each other, in the way of actually being with each other, the while attending to the other person rather than to the work. The evenings were when the attending happened. After supper and the kitchen cleared and the children put to bed, we sat by the fire and we talked or we did not talk. And in either case, the quality of the being together was different from the quality of the being together during the day. It was quieter, more contained. The dark outside and the limited light inside drew us closer to each other physically, closer to the fire, and that physical closeness had an effect on the kind of talking that happened, which was lower and more honest and less performing than the talk of the daylight hours. I think of it now as the talk that happened in the circle of the fire. The circle of the fire was maybe 6 feet across. Inside that circle, in the winter evenings especially, were Leonard and I, and whatever child had not yet managed to fall asleep. Everything outside the circle was dark. The dark outside the circle was not threatening to me. It was simply where the rest of the world was, at a comfortable distance, not pressing in on the circle, but enclosing it, holding it together. That's the name is one the name is. The dark held the light in. The light held us together. The circle of the fire in the dark of the room and the dark of the winter night was a contained thing, a bounded thing, and the boundedness of it was part of what made it feel like what it felt like, which was that Leonard and I were entirely present to each other in a way that did not require effort, because there was nothing else available. I did not understand this when I was living it. I understood it only after it was gone. The kerosene lamp came to our house in 1869. It was a wood lamp, a glass-based lamp with a brass collar and a clear chimney, and it gave 3 times the light of a tallow candle for about the same cost of fuel, and it could be carried from room to room and set on a table at a height that was practical for working at, and it was in every measurable way an improvement on what we had been using. I loved it immediately. I will not pretend otherwise. The kerosene lamp felt like a gift. It felt like more time added to the evening, like the dark retreating a respectable distance and giving you back hours you had not known you were missing. You could read comfortably. You could sew at a table. You could see the faces of the people across from you, which sounds like something you should have been able to do all along. But in the soft, uncertain light of tallow candles was not always fully the case. Leonard loved it too. He read more. He sat up later. He worked at the kitchen table in the evenings on the account books that he had previously done in the early morning by firelight, and he did it more carefully and with less squinting, and the accounts were more accurate as a result. The lamp was unambiguously better for the practical purposes of light. I am not going to argue otherwise. That would be dishonest, and dishonesty is not what I am here for. But something changed. It changed gradually, the way gradual things change, which is in a manner too slow to point to with a specific date, but too complete to deny once you are on the other side of it. The evenings became more separate. With more light available, there was more room, more actual visible room in the kitchen and the sitting room, and Leonard and I spread into that room in the way of people who have been compressed and then released. He sat at one end of the table with his books, and I sat at the other end with my sewing, and we were both in better light, and both more comfortable, and both, quote, in some way I'm still finding the words for, less with each other than we had been. The circle of the fire had contained us. The lamp did not contain us. The lamp lit the room, and we were each in our own portion of it, working on our own things, present in the same space, but not in the same way. Present, not pressed toward each other by the simple fact of where the light was. I noticed it in the spring of 1870, the first spring with the lamp. I noticed that we were not talking as much in the evenings as we had been, and when I tried to name why I could not name it, only feel it. The way you feel a change in weather before you can see it in the sky. The evenings were longer and quieter, and in a particular way lonelier. Though I had my husband right there at the table, and my children sleeping upstairs, and no reason I could have articulated to say that anything was wrong, I did not say anything about it. I told myself I was imagining the change. I told myself that better light was better light, and that I was being foolish to find anything to lament in a lamp that had made the evenings more comfortable. But the comfort had something missing in it that the discomfort had not lacked, and I kept noticing this without being able to name it for years. The years went on. The electric light came to the town of Greensburg in 1887, when I was 50 years old, and we were not in town. We were 6 miles south of it on the farm. But our eldest son worked in town, and he described the electric light to us in terms that suggested he had seen something close to miraculous, a light that did not flicker, did not require trimming, did not smell, did not demand the management of a wick and a chimney and a reservoir of fuel. Pure steady light at the turn of a handle. We did not get electricity on the farm for another 20 years. By then, Leonard and I were in our late 60s, and our children had grown and gone. And we were 2 old people in the house my husband had built in 1858, with the room that had been the children's room empty and quiet. When the electricity came to the farm in 1907, we were both glad of it. The electric light is brighter than the kerosene lamp and brighter still than the tallow candle, and it is genuinely easier on the eyes and the spirit both, and I am not going to tell you that I wished we had lived in the dark instead. But I will tell you this. In 1912, 5 years after the electricity came, Leonard died. He died in March, of his heart, at the age of 78, and it was not unexpected. He had been declining for 2 years, but the not unexpected quality of a death. does not make the arriving of it easy. I was 75 years old, and I sat in the kitchen of our house after he was gone, alone for the first time in 56 years. And the electric light was burning over the table because I had not thought to turn it off, and the room was bright and empty and very still. And I thought about the circle of the fire. I thought about it specifically in the way you think about something that has finally come into focus after years of being just out of reach. I thought about the winter evenings in the 1860s, before the kerosene lamp, when Leonard and I sat close to the fire because the fire was all the light there was, and the dark outside the circle held us in, and we talked in the low, close way of people who are contained together in a small lit space. And I thought about how that had changed and what it had changed into, the larger lit room with us at opposite ends of the table, and I wondered, for the first time with the full weight of the wondering, what we had lost in the gaining. We had gained time, we had gained comfort, we had gained the ability to see what we were doing and to do it longer and with less effort. Those are real gains, and I will not diminish them. But what we had lost was the pressing together, the containment, the particular quality of attention that comes from being in a small lit space with another person when everything outside the space is dark, and when the dark outside makes the light inside feel like something worth being inside of, something worth staying near. I have thought about this for 20 years since Leonard died, and I've finally come to something close to words for it. The darkness taught you that the light was a gift, and that the person in the light with you was also a gift, and that the smallness of the circle was not a poverty, but a richness, not a limitation, but a holding together that the limitlessness outside the circle could not provide. And when the darkness retreated, it took some of that with it. I am not asking you to give up your electric light. That would be foolish. I am not capable of going back, and I would not if I could. What I am asking you to think about is what the unlimited light in your life may have taken while it gave, in the evenings, in the rooms of your house, when you sit with the people you love. Are you in the same light or in your own portion of a larger light, separated by the comfortable distance that enough light allows? Are you pressed together by the smallness of the available warmth? Or are you spread into the available space the way people spread into space when it is available to them? I am not saying the answer is the right answer or the wrong answer. I am saying, look at it. Notice what the light has given and what it has made it possible to do without, because the thing that unlimited light makes possible to do without is the pressing together, the necessity of being near the source, the specific quality of conversation that happens when two people are close, because the cold and the dark have left them no reason to be otherwise. I still have evenings. I am 88 years old, and I have evenings the way anyone has evenings, the hours between supper and sleep. I often turn on fewer lights than I need. I sit near the window when the evening comes in the particular quality of last light that comes before the dark, and I put off the electric lamp for as long as the natural light will let me. Not because I am pretending the old world is still here, but because something in that quality of light, the fading sufficient light of an October evening, reminds me of what it was to sit close to the fire with Leonard and feel the dark outside making the inside feel like something worth being inside of. He is gone. The fire is gone. The dark of those winter evenings is gone. But the feeling of them, that is still here. That is still what I am trying to tell you. I dream about the kitchen in the old house. The fire is going. Leonard is on one side of it, and I am on the other. It is full dark outside, December dark, and the snow is on the fields. Inside the circle of the fire is everything. It is warm and small, and the light is exactly what it needs to be, which is enough and not a great deal more than enough. In the dream, I look across the fire at Leonard. He looks back. He is reading, but he has set the book down for a moment. In the dream, this is the whole conversation, the looking, the being looked at, the circle that holds us together because there is nothing else to see. And then I wake up in the bright electric morning and he is gone, and the circle is gone, and the pressing together is gone. And what it was really like to live without electricity or light is not what I would have told you when I had it, and not what you would expect me to tell you now. It was Whitmore before. It was Whitmore befoeing in my life. Let me tell you more specifically. Let me tell you the practical details, because the practical details are the place where most tellings of the old life fail, and the failure leaves people with a picture that is either too hard or too soft, and never the actual texture of it. Tallow candles. We made them in October from the fat we had rendered from the hog butchering, which happened in November. But the fat was prepared in October because you needed time and clean weather to do it right. My mother rendered the fat in a large iron pot over an outdoor fire, the white fat clarifying in the heat to a clear liquid that smelled of nothing you would enjoy but that served its purpose, which was to become the fuel of our evenings. She dipped the wicks in the tallow and hung them to cool and dipped them again, 20, 30, 40 dips to build up a candle of useful thickness. It took most of 2 days. By the end of the 2 days, she had perhaps 120 candles laid out in the cold of the root cellar to set, and she would do it again in February if the supply ran low. 2 cents. That is what a tallow candle cost in the stores in Greensburg if you bought them rather than made them, which we did not. But the price tells you something about the value of the time and fat that went into making them at home, which was roughly comparable, and which meant that burning 2 candles in an evening was a cost of approximately 4 cents, or nearly half the daily wage of a farm hand in those years, if he was paid cash, which many were not. You do not burn candles carelessly at 4 cents an evening when a farm hand earns 10 cents a day. You burn them when you need them, and you are careful, and you blow them out when the need is over. The fireplace was the center of the heat and a good portion of the light. A hardwood fire in a stone fireplace gives a quality of light that is warm and variable, not the steady flat light of a lamp, but a light that moves, that changes, that has a quality of presence that the steady lamplight does not have, and which I have tried to describe to people who have only ever sat and lamp and electric light, and found myself unable to convey fully. The fire in the fireplace was alive in a way that made the room feel inhabited in a different sense than the lamp inhabits it, the fire being a thing that required tending and responded to tending, that grew when you fed it and diminished when you did not, that crackled and shifted and occasionally startled you with a sound like a small sharp word. My father tended the fire. It was his particular domain within the household, which had nothing to do with any decision that had been made about the division of work, and everything to do with the fact that my father was the kind of person who liked to have a thing in his care, a living thing that responded to his attention, and the fire was that thing. He fed it with hickory from the woodpile outside the back door, which he stacked in September, and he read the fire the way some people read weather, knowing from the quality of the flame how the wood was burning and what it needed. I watched this as a child. I watch it still in memory. The woodpile itself. Let me tell you about the woodpile because it is one of the things that has no equivalent in the modern world and that people therefore cannot quite picture. We burned approximately 8 cords of wood in a Pennsylvania winter, 8 cords being 8 stacks of wood, 4 feet high and 8 feet long, which is a considerable quantity of wood, and which required my father and Eli to cut from the first week of September until the woodpile was complete, which was usually late October. The cutting was done with a 2-man cross-cut saw, the two of them on either end of the saw working in the rhythm that you develop over years of working together, and the sound of it, that particular rasp of a cross-cut saw on a dry fall morning, is a sound I can hear clearly still in the way of sounds from very early life that do not fade. 8 cords was what stood between us and cold. 8 cords, completed before the hard weather came, was the difference between a winter that was managed and a winter that was desperate. We watched the woodpile the way we watched the root cellar, as the measure of where we stood, and my father could tell you at any moment in January how much of the original pile remained and whether the calculation was comfortable or tight. In the winters where the calculation was tight, which happened perhaps twice in my childhood, the fire was kept smaller, the evenings shorter, the house colder. The cold was not dangerous if you were clothed for it and could move freely, but the cold was always present in the winter, present at the edges of rooms and in the upstairs where there was no fire, present in the feet under the blankets before the straw mattress had warmed to body temperature, present in the breath visible in the air of the bedroom on January mornings, the cold and the dark together. This is what I want you to understand, not as hardship to be catalogued, but as the condition that shaped everything else. The cold and the dark together created the conditions in which the warmth and the light were not ordinary, but were things with weight and presence, things you moved toward, things that gathered people because people needed gathering. In modern houses with electric light and coal furnaces or whatever they use to heat now, the light and warmth are ambient. They are everywhere. The room is warm and lit in every corner, and the effect of this on human behavior is that people spread out into the available warmth and light the way gases expand to fill a container. You put warmth and light everywhere, and people go everywhere, each to their own portion. In the old house, the warmth and light were in one place, the fire, and people came to the fire because the fire was where the warmth and light were, and in coming to the fire they came to each other, and the coming to each other was not a choice or decision, but a simple physical fact of where the good thing was. This is what I mean when I say the darkness held the light in. And this is what I mean when I say we lost something when the darkness retreated. Not that we chose to lose it, not that we should have refused the lamp or the electricity. I would not have refused them, and I did not refuse them, and I am glad I had them in the years I had them. But the refusal was not available, and the gaining was not neutral. And I think about the gains and the losses together. And I want people to know that there were both. I want to tell you something specific about the winter evenings before the kerosene lamp, something so specific that you can almost place yourself in it if you try. February of 1864, Leonard and I have been married 8 years, and our children are 6 and 4 and 2 years old. And it is the kind of February that Pennsylvania makes, which is full dark by 5 in the afternoon and not light again until after 7 in the morning, which means 14 hours of dark every day, which means the fire is the world. We have put the children to bed, the 2 older ones in the upstairs room, which is cold. under the quilts my mother made us as a wedding gift, and the youngest in the cradle near the fire because the youngest is not old enough for the cold upstairs. The fire is down from its working height, but still going, the bank coals glowing, a couple of hickory pieces laid on to last the night. There is one candle on the table, stuck in a tin holder my father made in 1845 from a piece of sheet iron punched with a nail, and by the light of that candle I am mending a shirt of Leonard's, and he is across from me reading the almanac. Outside the window the snow is coming. You can hear it, which people do not expect, but you can hear the particular quality of silence that snow makes as it falls, a soft pressure on the sounds of the night, the wind in the pines up the hill behind the house going quiet and quieter. Inside the circle of the candle there is the ticking of my needle through the fabric and the occasional turn of the almanac's page and the breathing of the baby in the cradle and the settling of the fire. Leonard looks up from the almanac. He says, "Snow coming in hard, maybe a foot by morning." I say, "I know." He says, "We'll have to dig to the barn early." I say, "I know." He goes back to the almanac. We say nothing further for perhaps 20 minutes. The candle burns down a notch. The baby stirs, and I watch the cradle until it is still again. Then Leonard puts down the almanac and looks across the table and says, "You tired?" I say, "A little." He says, "I'll bank the fire." I say, "All right." He banks the fire and I blow out the candle, and we go up the stairs in full dark, one hand on the wall, the other carrying the baby. And the upstairs is cold, and the bed is cold, and the quilts are heavy, and we are close because the cold and the dark make being close the natural and unremarkable thing. And outside the snow comes in, a foot of it, and by morning the world is white and we are still here, still inside, and the fire needs building and the barn needs reaching and the day needs beginning. That is what it was like. Not a hardship, not a romance, a life. A life with a texture and a quality and a particular kind of intimacy that the cold and the dark and the limited light created, not despite themselves, but because of themselves, because the constraints created the conditions, and the conditions created the closeness, and the closeness was the thing that I'm trying, after all these years, to name. I want to say something directly to you. If you are reading this, you live in the light. You have more light than you need. You have light in every room and at every hour, and in the summer your evenings are extended by electric light until it is nearly impossible to feel the pressure of the dark at all. This is a gift. I mean that without irony. The light is a gift. But I want you to look at the people in your house. Look at where they are in the evening. Look at how far apart they are, each in their own portion of the available light. Look at whether the evenings bring you together or let you apart. And if the answer is that they let you apart, that the light and warmth are everywhere, and so you are each in your own, everywhere, I want you to ask yourself whether you could try, just sometimes, to make the circle smaller. Put out a light. Sit closer to one source. Make the light specific and limited. Not everything everywhere, but here together. And see if the quality of the conversation changes. See if the old thing reasserts itself. That pressing together the dark and the cold and the one candle in the tin holder created. The particular quality of presence that is only possible when you are in the same small light, and everything outside it is dark. You do not need to live without electricity to feel what I am describing. You only need to choose sometimes to make the circle smaller. I see Leonard in the evening still. Not in dreams exactly. In the quality of the light when the sun is going down and I have not yet turned on the lamp. That particular failing light of an autumn evening that is still enough, and not much more than enough. The light that was the ordinary light of the old world, and that is now only available in the brief window between day and dark, before I turn on the lamp. In that window he is right there, across from me, reading the almanac or looking up from it to say something ordinary, something about the weather or the work tomorrow. And the circle holds us in, as it always did, the dim light making the space between us small, and the small space making the being together feel like what it always was, which was the whole world. And then I turn on the lamp, and the room gets large and bright, and the circle disappears. And what it was really like living without electricity or light is the thing I carry, which is that the dark gave me more of him than the light ever could. There are things I did not tell you yet about the practical life that deserve to be said, because the practical life is where the truth lives, and I have promised you the truth. The smell of the candles. Tallow is rendered animal fat, and it burns with a smell that is not offensive, but is unmistakable, a warm, slightly thick smell that gets into everything, into the curtains and the walls and the hair of the people who live in the house, and that you stop noticing after the first few years because it becomes the smell of home. And that I noticed for the first time as a particular smell when I spent 2 weeks in the summer of 1870 at my sister Martha's house in Pittsburgh, where they had been using kerosene for 3 years. And I came home to our tallow candle house, and the smell of it came to me as a stranger for the first time in my life. That moment, standing in the doorway of our kitchen after 2 weeks away, the smell of the tallow coming to me as something distinct and particular. That is still one of the clearest sensory memories I have, the smell of home arriving as a stranger and then resolving back into home within the space of a single breath. The wick trimming. Tallow candles needed their wicks trimmed every hour or so to keep the flame from smoking, and you trimmed them with the small scissors that were kept specifically for the purpose, and the trimming was so regular a task that you did it without thinking the way you breathe, just a thing that happened as part of the evening. I trimmed candle wicks so many thousands of times across my life that my hands remember the motion. The going to bed by dark. People today stay up far later than we did because the light allows it, because the light extends the possibilities of the evening past the point where the body is naturally inclined to rest. We went to bed earlier, not because we were more tired, though we were certainly tired, but because the dark imposed a natural end on the evening that the electric light has removed. When the candle burned down and when the fire got too low to see by, the evening was over. There was not much argument with that. You banked a fire, and you went to bed, and the rest could wait until morning. And the mornings. Let me tell you about the mornings, which are the other side of the dark, that people do not often think about. The mornings were early, earlier than I ever asked them to be. Not because we wanted to rise early, but because the dark of the night ended at a particular time determined by the season, and when it ended you knew it, and the knowing of it was your alarm. In summer, the birds started before 4 in the morning, and there was light in the eastern window by 5, and the day was already happening, and you were going to be in it. In winter, the dark lasted longer, and you slept later. And this was not laziness, but a natural accommodation to the season that the electric light has eliminated, because now you can keep the dark of winter going indefinitely, past the point where morning has come and gone, and you have missed it. I did not miss mornings. I was in them. This is a small thing, but I do not think it is a small thing. Being in the morning, the actual morning, the first hour of it when the light is coming in from the east and the air has the particular freshness of a day that has not yet been breathed in, when the frost is on the pumpkins in October and the dew is on the hay in July, and the world has a quality of beginning that it loses by 8 o'clock. I was in that every morning of my life until the electric light came and made it possible to extend the night past the morning. I am still in it. At 88 years old, I am still in the mornings because the habit of early rising does not leave a person who was formed by the dark. I wake before the electric light is any purchase, and I sit at the kitchen window and I watch the eastern sky go from dark to gray to the first thin pale light. And I think about what I have just told you, which is that the dark is not only a poverty, but also a shaping force, a thing that formed the days and the nights and the people in them in a way that has not been replaced, only abandoned. I have no instruction for you from this. I had an instruction in the section you just heard, which was to make the circle smaller, to choose the specific light over the ambient light, to sit close to one source and see what the closeness produces. That is the practical instruction, and it stands. The rest is only the account of a world that was and is no longer, told by someone who was in it and remembers it clearly and wants you to know that what it was really like was not what you think, and not what I thought either when I was young enough to take it for granted. The dark held the light in. The light held us together. That is the whole lesson, and I did not know it until the light went everywhere and the holding together went with it. What it was really like living without electricity or light is the best thing I ever lost.